You lack discipline completely, starting strong but fading fast, making plans you never execute, setting goals you immediately abandon, promising change but staying exactly the same, and relying on motivation that disappears the moment difficulty appears. This lack of discipline is destroying your potential by keeping you trapped in cycles of intention without action, destroying your success by ensuring ideas never become reality, destroying your self-respect by proving repeatedly you cannot trust yourself, destroying your confidence by accumulating evidence of your weakness, and destroying your future by guaranteeing you'll remain exactly where you are regardless of your talents or opportunities. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment, the force that executes when motivation disappears, and the system that guarantees results when feelings fail. This audiobook teaches forced discipline mastery through the psychology of self-control that reveals how to build unbreakable habits, the neuroscience of willpower that shows how to expand your discipline capacity, the practices of automatic execution that eliminate dependence on motivation, and the systems of forced consistency that make discipline inevitable rather than optional. Stop relying on motivation that abandons you constantly and start building forced discipline that executes regardless of feelings. Stop making plans you never follow and start creating systems that guarantee execution. Forced discipline never depends on feelings. Unbreakable self-control executes automatically. Systematic consistency produces inevitable results, and disciplined action creates the success that motivation alone promises but never delivers. Beginning now. Chapter 1. You lack discipline. Recognize self-control failure patterns. You lack discipline completely in every area of your life. Starting projects with genuine enthusiasm and optimistic commitment, but fading fast within days or even hours when initial excitement wears off and actual work begins. You make ambitious plans with sincere intentions to follow through this time, setting impressive goals that look perfect on paper but immediately abandon when facing the first real difficulty or discomfort that requires sustained effort beyond your current capacity. You promise yourself repeatedly that you'll change your patterns and finally develop the consistency necessary for success, but you stay exactly the same year after year, accumulating more evidence that you cannot trust yourself to follow through on anything requiring discipline over extended time. This pattern of complete discipline failure manifests through specific recognizable behaviors that you can observe once you become honest about your actual track record, rather than the story you tell yourself. Starting strong, then fading appears when you begin new projects with tremendous enthusiasm and energy, but abandon them within days when novelty wears off and grinding consistency becomes necessary. Motivation dependence means you only take action when feeling inspired and excited, stopping completely the moment motivation disappears and waiting passively for it to return before acting again. Willpower depletion shows your discipline strongest in early morning when willpower is fresh but completely gone by evening when you've exhausted your limited self-control through accumulated decisions and temptations throughout the day. Motivation is temporary feeling. Discipline is permanent system. Build discipline or remain unreliable. Excuse creation reveals your sophisticated ability to justify why today is an exception to your commitments, why circumstances make following through impossible right now, why breaking your promise to yourself is reasonable and necessary rather than simple failure of discipline. Inconsistency patterns show sporadic effort rather than daily execution, bursts of activity followed by long periods of inaction, intense focus for brief periods followed by complete abandonment, creating results that match your inconsistent input with equally inconsistent and disappointing outcomes. The fundamental discipline motivation confusion means most people wait passively for motivation to appear before taking action, believing incorrectly that discipline means forcing yourself to do things you hate through pure willpower and suffering. Actually, discipline is a systematic approach that makes desired action automatic regardless of feelings, removing dependence on motivation that fluctuates wildly and cannot be relied upon for consistent execution over extended time periods required for significant achievement. Research by Roy Baumeister on self-control demonstrates that discipline operates like physical muscle that strengthens progressively with regular use and weakens steadily with neglect, that willpower depletes predictably throughout each day with every decision made and every temptation resisted, and that people with strongest apparent self-control actually structure their lives strategically to avoid needing constant willpower by creating environments and systems that make discipline automatic, rather than requiring repeated conscious effort. The devastating cost of lacking discipline accumulates relentlessly over years and decades, preventing you from ever realizing your potential because brilliant ideas never become actual results without disciplined execution. Each failure to follow through erodes your self-trust progressively as you accumulate overwhelming evidence that you're unreliable even to yourself, that your word means nothing, that your commitments are temporary at best. Opportunities requiring consistent effort over time pass you by completely because you cannot maintain discipline long enough to capture them, leaving you watching others less talented succeed through superior consistency. Regret compounds as you look back on wasted years and abandoned projects, wondering what you could have achieved if you'd possessed the discipline to persist through difficulty. Motivation is temporary feeling. Discipline is permanent system. Build discipline or remain unreliable. Recognition of your discipline failure requires brutal honesty about your actual performance rather than your intended performance or the justifications you've created. Track what you commit to versus what you actually do over the past month, identifying the ratio of promises made to promises kept. Identify when your discipline fails most predictably by examining time of day, situations, and emotional states where you consistently break commitments. Examine what excuses you use repeatedly to justify breaking your word to yourself, the sophisticated rationalizations that make quitting feel reasonable rather than recognizing it as simple discipline failure. You recognize discipline failure now. Next, you must understand the psychology. Chapter 2. Understand discipline psychology, the neuroscience of self-control. Discipline operates through specific neurological mechanisms involving distinct brain regions that either enable self-control or undermine, depending on their activation and development. Your prefrontal cortex handles executive function, including delayed gratification, impulse control, and rational decision-making that overrides immediate desires for long-term benefit. Your anterior cingulate cortex monitors internal conflicts between what you want to do and what you should do, enabling you to choose discipline over temptation when functioning optimally. Your reward circuitry involving dopamine determines whether you pursue immediate small rewards or delayed larger rewards, with discipline requiring the capacity to choose future benefits over present pleasure. The famous marshmallow test, conducted by Walter Mischel in the 1960s, reveals the profound lifelong impact of self-control capacity developed in childhood. Children who resisted eating one marshmallow immediately to receive 2 marshmallows later demonstrated significantly better life outcomes decades afterward, achieving higher academic success, better health, more career achievement, and greater overall life satisfaction. The ability to delay gratification in childhood predicted success across entire lifetime more accurately than intelligence, family background, or other factors typically considered important, showing that self-control capacity determines life trajectory more than almost any other single factor. Discipline is learnable skill, not fixed trait. Practice builds capacity systematically. Train discipline or remain weak. The ego depletion model developed through extensive research shows that willpower functions as a limited resource that depletes progressively throughout each day rather than remaining constant. Your discipline is strongest in early morning when willpower reserves are full, and weakest in evening when you've exhausted your self-control through accumulated decisions, resisted temptations, and controlled impulses throughout the day. This explains why you can resist temptation successfully in morning, but surrender to the same temptation easily in evening when willpower has depleted completely. The critical discipline-habit relationship reveals that discipline is required initially to install new habit through consistent repetition, but the habit eventually runs automatically without requiring ongoing discipline once neural pathways strengthen sufficiently through repetition. This means short-term discipline investment during habit formation creates long-term automatic behavior that no longer requires willpower or conscious effort, making the temporary discomfort worthwhile for permanent automatic execution that follows. Neuroplasticity enables systematic discipline development through specific mechanisms that change your brain structure permanently. Repeated practice of self-control strengthens your prefrontal cortex physically, increasing its capacity for impulse control and delayed gratification. Consistent discipline builds new neural pathways that make self-control progressively easier through repeated activation. Systematic practice creates automatic responses where discipline once required conscious effort and willpower. Sustained effort over months and years changes your actual brain structure, making you fundamentally more capable of self-control than you were previously. The glucose-willpower connection reveals that self-control requires actual metabolic energy in the form of glucose, meaning depleted blood sugar directly impairs your discipline capacity. Proper nutrition maintains willpower by providing steady glucose supply, while poor nutrition or extended fasting reduces self-control capacity measurably. This explains why discipline is harder when hungry and why maintaining stable blood sugar through proper eating supports sustained self-control throughout the day. Discipline is learnable skill, not fixed trait. Practice builds capacity systematically. Train discipline or remain weak. Understanding these neurological and psychological mechanisms demonstrates conclusively that discipline isn't fixed character trait you're born with or without, but rather learnable skill that develops systematically through deliberate practice, proper environment design, and strategic willpower conservation. The identity discipline loop operates powerfully where seeing yourself as a disciplined person makes discipline significantly easier because behavior aligns with identity, while identifying as undisciplined makes self-control harder because you unconsciously behave consistently with how you see yourself, creating self-fulfilling prophecy in either direction that either supports or undermines discipline development. You understand discipline psychology now. Next, you must design environment. Chapter 3. Design your environment. Remove temptation and friction. Environment design is the most powerful discipline tool available because changing your physical and digital surroundings changes your behavior automatically without requiring constant willpower or conscious effort. Most people make the critical mistake of trying to use discipline to overcome bad environment, exhausting their limited willpower fighting constant temptation rather than designing environment that makes discipline automatic and resistance unnecessary. Your surroundings determine behavior far more powerfully than willpower ever could because you cannot sustain constant self-control against environment designed to undermine discipline. Environmental factors affecting discipline include your physical space, where what you see directly influences what you do, accessibility, where easy actions happen automatically while difficult actions get delayed or avoided, default options, where what happens automatically without decision shapes outcomes, social surroundings, where who you're with profoundly affects your behavior through unconscious mimicry and social pressure, and digital environment, where notifications, apps, and defaults either support or sabotage discipline constantly. Environment determines behavior more than willpower. Design surroundings for automatic discipline. Engineer environment or fight constant temptation. The path of least resistance principle means people consistently take the easiest available option in any situation, making effective discipline about making desired behavior the easiest choice rather than fighting constantly to choose harder path that requires sustained willpower. Temptation removal eliminates willpower requirements entirely by removing bad options completely rather than requiring you to resist them repeatedly throughout each day, such as removing all junk food from your house rather than relying on willpower to resist it every time you see it, deleting social media apps from your phone rather than resisting checking them hundreds of times daily, or canceling subscriptions to services that waste your time rather than resisting using them through pure self-control. Friction addition makes undesired behavior significantly harder by deliberately adding steps, obstacles, and barriers between you and temptation, such as putting your phone in another room rather than keeping it beside your bed, where checking it requires zero effort, making television difficult to access by unplugging it and storing the remote in another room rather than having it immediately available, or requiring multiple steps to access distracting websites rather than visiting them with single click. Friction removal makes desired behavior dramatically easier by systematically eliminating obstacles and barriers that prevent action, such as laying out gym clothes the night before rather than deciding what to wear and gathering items when you're supposed to exercise, preparing healthy meals in advance when willpower is high rather than deciding what to eat when hungry and willpower is depleted, or creating dedicated workspace with everything you need already present rather than gathering materials when trying to work and facing friction that prevents starting. The activation energy concept borrowed from chemistry applies directly to human behavior, where high activation energy prevents action from occurring, while low activation energy enables it easily. Discipline is often less about strengthening willpower and more about lowering activation energy for desired behaviors through removing obstacles while simultaneously raising activation energy for undesired behaviors through adding friction. Strategic defaults make discipline completely automatic by setting up systems that do the right thing without requiring any decision or willpower, such as automatic savings transfers that move money to savings before you can spend it rather than deciding to save for whatever remains, scheduled workouts with trainer or class where attendance is expected rather than deciding daily when and whether to exercise, or meal delivery service providing healthy food automatically rather than deciding what to eat and whether to cook every single day. Environment determines behavior more than willpower. Design surroundings for automatic discipline. Engineer environment or fight constant temptation. You understand now that environment design is more powerful than willpower for creating discipline because surroundings shape behavior automatically without depleting limited self-control. Stop trying to use willpower to overcome bad environment and start systematically designing surroundings that make discipline automatic, resistance unnecessary, and desired behavior the path of least resistance rather than constant uphill battle requiring unsustainable willpower. You design environment now. Next, you must build keystone habits. Chapter 4. Build keystone habits. One habit that changes everything. Keystone habits are single powerful habits that trigger cascading positive changes across multiple life areas simultaneously, creating disproportionate impact because they alter related patterns automatically without requiring separate discipline for each change. These special habits function like the keystone in an arch that holds all other stones in place, where establishing one keystone habit makes dozens of other positive behaviors easier or automatic through chain reaction effects that transform your entire life from single disciplined action. Research by Charles Duhigg on habit formation demonstrates that keystone habits create powerful chain reactions, transforming other habits automatically. They establish cultures and environments where excellence becomes easier and more natural. Small wins from keystone habits trigger transformative changes across unrelated domains. And maintaining one disciplined habit makes developing other discipline significantly easier through momentum and identity effects. Keystone habits trigger cascading discipline. One habit changes everything systematically. Build keystone or struggle with scattered efforts. Common keystone habits that create cascading positive changes include morning exercise, which increases energy levels throughout the day, improves mood and emotional regulation, creates discipline momentum that carries into other areas, triggers healthier eating automatically because you don't want to waste a workout, and establishes identity as someone who takes care of themselves. Making your bed daily creates immediate sense of accomplishment. Starting your day positively establishes order and control in your environment, triggers cleaning and organizing the rest of your room, and proves you can control your behavior regardless of how you feel. Meditation practice builds fundamental self-awareness that improves all decision-making, improves impulse control that strengthens discipline across domains, increases emotional regulation, reducing reactive behavior, and creates calm-centeredness that improves everything you do throughout the day. Early waking provides uninterrupted time before the world makes demands, establishes immediate control over your day, creates disciplined foundation that influences all subsequent behaviors, and generates pride and momentum from winning the morning. The keystone habit selection process requires careful consideration because not all habits create equal cascading effects. Choose habit that aligns with the identity you want to build rather than random behavior. Select behavior you can realistically maintain daily regardless of circumstances or feelings. Pick action that creates immediate small when you can feel and recognize, and choose habit that naturally triggers other positive behaviors through logical connection or psychological momentum. The morning keystone power comes from multiple reinforcing factors that make morning habits particularly effective. Establishing discipline when willpower is highest sets tone for entire day. Creating momentum that carries forward makes subsequent discipline easier. Proving to yourself first thing that you can control your behavior builds confidence. And triggering identity as disciplined person influences all later choices through wanting to maintain consistency with self-concept. Implementation of keystone habits requires starting impossibly small to guarantee success rather than attempting impressive version that sounds good but fails quickly. Focusing exclusively on consistency over intensity initially because daily repetition matters more than single impressive performance. Never missing 2 days in a row, which prevents breaking momentum completely, and gradually increasing difficulty only after establishing unbreakable consistency at easier level first. The habit stacking technique builds additional habits onto your keystone by identifying your current reliable habit that happens automatically, attaching new desired habit immediately after the existing one, using the trigger of existing habit to remember new behavior without requiring separate reminder, and creating chain of automatic behaviors that execute in sequence without requiring multiple decisions or sustained willpower throughout the day. Keystone habits trigger cascading discipline. One habit changes everything systematically. Build keystone or struggle with scattered efforts. The identity reinforcement from keystone habits works because each execution proves you're the type of person who does this consistently. Repeated behavior shapes your self-concept progressively over time. Seeing yourself as disciplined person makes all discipline easier through alignment. An identity change precedes and enables lasting behavior change rather than requiring constant willpower to act inconsistently with who you believe you are fundamentally. You build keystone habits now. Next, you must use implementation intentions. Chapter 5. Use implementation intentions. Automate discipline through planning. Implementation intentions are specific if-then plans that automate discipline completely by predefining exactly what you'll do in specific situations before they occur, removing dangerous moment-to-moment decisions where discipline typically fails when willpower is depleted and temptation is strong. These precise conditional plans eliminate the need for motivation or willpower in the moment by making behavior automatic when predetermined trigger occurs, bypassing the deliberation and negotiation with yourself that usually results in choosing comfort over discipline. Research by Peter Gollwitzer on implementation intentions demonstrates conclusively that specific if-then plans double or even triple success rates compared to simple goal setting. That specific situational triggers create automatic behavioral responses that execute without conscious decision. That if-then planning completely bypasses motivation requirements by removing choice from the equation. And that pre-commitment through implementation intentions eliminates decision points that normally enable disciplined failure when you're tired, stressed, or facing temptation. Vague intentions require constant willpower. Implementation intentions create automatic discipline, predefine behavior, or decide repeatedly when weak. The fundamental discipline problem with vague intentions is that they leave behavior to moment-to-moment decision-making where you must choose discipline repeatedly throughout each day, requiring fresh willpower and motivation in every single moment when facing choice between discipline and comfort, creating literally countless opportunities to fail as willpower depletes and circumstances change, and making long-term consistency mathematically impossible because you cannot sustain perfect decision-making indefinitely. Implementation intentions solve this critical problem through precise formula, where a specific situation X occurs, then I will immediately do specific behavior Y, creating automatic trigger response patterns that execute without deliberation, eliminating the decision-making process where discipline typically fails, and making desired behavior activate automatically without requiring conscious choice or sustained willpower. Effective implementation intention formula requires 3 essential elements for maximum effectiveness. First, identify a specific situation trigger, such as precise time, exact place, or specific preceding event rather than vague circumstances. Second, define specific action, meaning exact behavior with clear parameters rather than vague intention that requires interpretation. Third, absolute commitment using language then I will rather than might, should, or could, which leave room for negotiation and failure. Common discipline implementation intentions that prevent typical failure points include: if my alarm sounds at 6 a.m., then I will immediately stand up and drink full glass of water before allowing any negotiation. If I finish eating breakfast, then I will immediately put on exercise clothes and begin workout without checking phone or email. If I feel urged to check my phone during work, then I will take 3 deep breaths and return attention to current task. If I sit down at my desk to work, then I will close all browser tabs except what I need and work on single priority tasks for 30 minutes. If it's 9 p.m., then I will begin my bedtime routine regardless of what I'm doing or how I feel about stopping. The obstacle planning component anticipates common barriers and predefines responses to prevent them from derailing discipline. If I feel too tired to exercise, then I will do just 5 minutes knowing I can stop after that. If I want to skip meditation because I'm busy, then I will do 2 minutes instead of my normal 20. If I'm tempted to eat junk food, then I will drink large glass of water and wait 10 minutes before reconsidering. These obstacle plans prevent the all-or-nothing thinking that causes complete abandonment when perfect execution is impossible. Vague intentions require constant willpower. Implementation intentions create automatic discipline, predefine behavior, or decide repeatedly when weak. The pre-commitment power of implementation intentions removes all future decisions by deciding once in advance when you're rational and motivated rather than deciding repeatedly in the moment when you're tired and tempted, committing when your prefrontal cortex is strong rather than when depleted, eliminating the negotiation with yourself that wastes willpower and usually results in choosing comfort, and making discipline automatic rather than chosen, which removes it from the realm of motivation and willpower entirely. You use implementation intentions now. Next, you must practice discomfort. Chapter 6. practice deliberate discomfort. Build discipline through voluntary hardship. Deliberate discomfort training builds discipline capacity systematically by voluntarily choosing difficulty when you could easily choose comfort. Strengthening your self-control muscle through progressive overload of willpower challenges that expand your capacity to persist despite suffering. This practice involves deliberately doing hard things when easy options are available, choosing temporary suffering when comfort is possible, and exposing yourself to controlled hardship that builds the mental toughness required for sustained discipline in areas that actually matter for your success and achievement. The comfort addiction problem destroying modern discipline is that avoiding all discomfort whenever possible progressively weakens your discipline capacity. Choosing ease and convenience at every opportunity atrophies your self-control like an used muscle. Never voluntarily doing hard things when easy alternatives exist makes you incapable of discipline when circumstances require it. And building your entire life around comfort and convenience guarantees you'll be unable to handle the inevitable difficulties that all meaningful achievement requires. Comfort addiction destroys discipline capacity. Deliberate discomfort builds unbreakable self-control. Choose hard or remain weak. Deliberate discomfort practices that build discipline include cold exposure through cold showers or ice baths that trigger overwhelming urge to escape, but you stay anyway. Intermittent fasting or strategic meal skipping that builds delayed gratification capacity and proves you control eating rather than hunger controlling you. Physical challenges like difficult exercise or endurance training that builds mental toughness alongside physical capacity. Voluntary simplicity through giving up luxuries and living with less to build non-dependence on comfort. An extended silence and solitude that forces you to be alone with your thoughts without constant distraction and entertainment. The discipline transfer effect means that building self-control in one domain strengthens it across all other areas of life. Cold shower discipline, where you choose discomfort, transfers directly to work discipline, where you choose difficult tasks over easy ones. Fasting discipline transfers to focus discipline, where you resist distraction. Exercise discipline transfers to relationship discipline, where you do hard things to maintain connection. And any area where you strengthen self-control increases your capacity for discipline everywhere, because self-control is general capacity, not domain-specific skill. Research by Andrew Huberman on stress inoculation demonstrates that controlled stress exposure progressively increases your overall stress tolerance. Deliberate discomfort systematically expands your comfort zone boundaries. Systematic voluntary challenge builds resilience that makes you stronger rather than breaking you. Involuntary hardship creates anti-fragility, where you actually gain from disorder and difficulty rather than merely surviving it or being destroyed by it. The misogi practice, borrowed from Japanese tradition, involves undertaking one extremely difficult physical or mental challenge annually. Choosing something that's approximately 50-50 whether you can actually complete it, committing absolutely to not quitting regardless of how difficult it becomes, and proving definitively to yourself that you won't quit under any circumstances, which transforms your identity and self-concept fundamentally. The daily micro-challenges build discipline through small, uncomfortable actions every single day without exception. Progressive increase in difficulty as your capacity expands, never going backwards to easier versions once you've handled harder challenges, and steadily accumulating evidence that you're someone who can do genuinely hard things, which shapes identity as disciplined person. Comfort addiction destroys discipline capacity. Deliberate discomfort builds unbreakable self-control. Choose hard or remain weak. The deeper purpose behind deliberate discomfort practice is proving to yourself that you control your behavior rather than comfort controlling you. Building genuine confidence through demonstrated capability rather than empty affirmations. Systematically expanding what's possible for you by pushing beyond previous limits. and creating fundamental identity as person who does hard things, which makes all subsequent discipline easier because you're simply acting consistently with who you know yourself to be through accumulated evidence. You practice deliberate discomfort now. Next, you must measure everything. Chapter 7. Measure and track everything. Data drives discipline. Measurement and tracking dramatically increase discipline because what gets measured gets managed through heightened awareness. Awareness of behavior changes behavior automatically without requiring additional willpower, and visible progress creates intrinsic motivation to continue that doesn't depend on external rewards or temporary feelings. The fundamental tracking power comes from making previously invisible behaviors completely visible where you can see them objectively, creating accountability to yourself through recorded evidence of performance, providing objective data versus unreliable subjective feelings that justify breaking commitments, revealing patterns you absolutely cannot see without systematic data collection, and generating deep satisfaction from maintaining unbroken streaks that becomes its own powerful motivation. Common tracking methods that work effectively include habit tracking, where you mark off each day you execute your commitment, streak counting, where you track consecutive days without breaking your discipline, quantified metrics using actual numbers showing objective progress, before-after comparisons documenting your starting point and current state to see total transformation, and photographic evidence, creating visual proof of your consistency over time that feelings cannot deny or distort. What gets measured gets managed. Tracking creates accountability and progress. Measure discipline or remain unaware of failure patterns. The Seinfeld strategy, named after comedian Jerry Seinfeld, involves marking a large X on your calendar every single day you execute your commitment, creating visual chain of excess that grows longer with each consecutive day. Making your primary goal, simply don't break the chain rather than focusing on outcomes. And finding that the streak itself becomes powerfully motivating once it gets long enough that breaking it feels genuinely costly. Research by B.J. Fogg on behavior design demonstrates that tracking automatically celebrates small wins by making progress visible. Celebration following behavior reinforces that behavior neurologically. Positive emotion generated by seeing progress makes the habit stick more effectively. And tracking creates positive feedback loop where seeing progress motivates continued effort, which creates more progress, which generates more motivation in self-reinforcing cycle. The measurement specificity principle requires tracking exact specific behaviors rather than vague intentions that cannot be objectively verified, measuring objective quantifiable data rather than subjective assessments that shift with your mood, recording results immediately after execution rather than trying to remember and record from memory later, and maintaining rigorous accuracy in your tracking rather than aspirational tracking that records what you wish you'd done instead of actual performance. The progress visibility that tracking creates builds discipline through seeing accumulation of daily actions over weeks and months, recognizing long-term patterns that aren't visible in any single day, identifying specific weaknesses requiring system improvement rather than more willpower, and celebrating consistency despite imperfect execution, which maintains motivation during inevitable difficult periods. The public tracking option amplifies effectiveness by sharing your progress with an accountability partner who expects updates, posting regular updates on social media where friends witness your commitment, joining tracking groups where others are pursuing similar goals, making your failure visible to others, which leverages social pressure positively, and knowing that breaking commitment won't just disappoint you, but others who are watching. The analytics review process involves weekly assessment of tracking data to identify trends, monthly pattern analysis to understand what's working and what needs adjustment, quarterly progress evaluation to see transformation over longer time frames, annual transformation documentation to recognize how far you've actually come, and using accumulated data to systematically adjust your systems rather than making random changes based on feelings. What gets measured gets managed. Tracking creates accountability and progress. Measure discipline or remain unaware of failure patterns. The streak psychology works powerfully because breaking a long streak feels genuinely costly after investing weeks or months. Maintaining the streak becomes an engaging game you want to win. Consecutive days create momentum that makes continuing easier than stopping. Your identity shifts progressively to person who doesn't break streaks. And the visual chain of successful days creates pride and motivation that sustains discipline when feelings fail. You measure and track now. Next, you must build gradually. Chapter 8. Build discipline gradually. Progressive overload for self-control. Discipline builds like physical muscle through progressive overload, where you gradually increase demands on your self-control capacity rather than attempting maximum discipline immediately and inevitably failing within days. This systematic approach applies the same principles that build physical strength to building mental discipline, starting with loads lighter than you think necessary, increasing difficulty gradually and systematically according to proven protocols, allowing adequate recovery and adaptation time between increases, building foundational capacity before attempting heavy loads, and prioritizing unbreakable consistency over impressive intensity that cannot be sustained. The common devastating mistake that guarantees failure is starting with extreme discipline requirements that sound impressive but exceed your current capacity, burning out completely within days or weeks when willpower depletes, concluding incorrectly that you fundamentally lack discipline capacity, when actually you simply attempted far too much too soon before building the foundational self-control that ambitious discipline requires. Extreme discipline attempts fail quickly. Progressive building creates lasting capacity. Start small or burn out attempting too much. Progressive overload principles borrowed from strength training apply directly to discipline development and work identically. Start significantly lighter than you think necessary to guarantee early success. Increase difficulty gradually and systematically following predetermined progression. Allow recovery and adaptation time before adding more challenge. Build substantial capacity at current level before increasing load, and prioritize maintaining consistency over achieving intensity, because discipline is marathon, not sprint. The minimum viable discipline approach means starting with an embarrassingly easy version of your desired habit that feels almost too simple, guaranteeing you can succeed daily regardless of circumstances or feelings. Building genuine confidence through accumulating consistent wins over weeks, and gradually increasing difficulty only after establishing completely unbreakable consistency at easier level first. Examples of progressive discipline building that actually work include starting with just 2 push-ups daily before attempting full workout program, meditating for only 2 minutes before building toward 20-minute sessions, waking just 15 minutes earlier than normal before attempting extreme early rising, working in focused 10-minute blocks before attempting hours-long deep work sessions. And in every case, building consistency first before concerning yourself with impressive performance. The 2-minute rule states that new habits should take 2 minutes or less when you're initially installing them, proving you can show up consistently without concerning yourself with outcomes, establishing the behavior pattern before optimizing performance, and making consistency so easy that you literally cannot fail even on your worst days. The habit-shaping progression follows logical sequence that works because it respects how discipline actually develops. Master showing up consistently before concerning yourself with performance quality. Establish unbreakable consistency before attempting intensity. Prove reliability to yourself over weeks before attempting excellence. Build solid foundation before trying to construct cathedral, and trust that progression will come naturally once consistency is absolutely established. Research by James Clear on atomic habits demonstrates that tiny changes create remarkable results through compound effects over time, Getting just 1% better daily creates 37 times improvement over 1 year through exponential compounding. Small habits aggregate into extraordinary outcomes that seem impossible at the start. And consistency beats intensity over extended time frames because sustainable beats unsustainable always. Extreme discipline attempts fail quickly. Progressive building creates lasting capacity. Start small or burn out attempting too much. The patience requirement means accepting that real discipline builds slowly over months, not days. Trusting the systematic process over weeks when results aren't yet visible. Resisting the strong urge to increase difficulty too quickly, celebrating small wins along the gradual journey, and understanding that genuine mastery requires extended time and cannot be rushed regardless of how much you want immediate transformation. You build discipline gradually now. Next, you must practice daily. Chapter 9. Practice forced discipline daily. Build unbreakable self-control. Unbreakable discipline develops through consistent daily practice of specific exercises that systematically build your self-control capacity, progressively expand your willpower reserves, and create automatic execution systems that make discipline inevitable rather than optional. 5 daily practices build forced discipline that executes regardless of feelings or circumstances through creating neural pathways, establishing identity, and removing dependence on motivation that fluctuates wildly and cannot be relied upon. Morning discipline ritual involves executing predetermined sequence immediately upon waking without allowing any decisions or negotiations with yourself, proving definitively that you control your behavior rather than feelings controlling you, and establishing discipline momentum that carries through entire day, making all subsequent discipline easier. Temptation resistance practice means deliberately exposing yourself to temptation and consciously choosing discipline over comfort, building resistance muscle through repeated successful denial rather than avoiding temptation completely, and strengthening self-control capacity through practice the same way you'd strengthen physical muscles through progressive resistance training. Discipline requires daily practice. Occasional effort creates no lasting capacity. Practice systematically or remain undisciplined. Implementation intention execution involves following your predetermined if-then plans automatically without deliberation when triggers occur, refusing to negotiate or reconsider when the moment arrives, tracking your adherence to pre-commitments objectively to identify failure patterns, and progressively strengthening your automatic execution through successful repetitions that reinforce neural pathways. Discomfort tolerance training requires choosing the hard option when easy alternative is available, doing at least one genuinely uncomfortable thing every single day without exception, systematically expanding your capacity to persist despite resistance and suffering, and accumulating evidence that you're capable of sustained discomfort, which transforms identity and makes all future discipline easier. Evening discipline review involves assessing your day's discipline honestly, without self-deception or justification, identifying specific failure points requiring system improvement rather than more willpower, celebrating wins no matter how small, while objectively analyzing losses, planning tomorrow's discipline with adjustments based on today's data, and maintaining brutal honesty about actual performance versus intended performance. The discipline progression follows entirely predictable stages that everyone experiences during transformation. Week 1 focuses primarily on developing awareness of your current lack of discipline and recognizing patterns. Weeks 2 through 4 involve building consistency with embarrassingly easy commitments that guarantee success. Months 2 through 3 progressively increase difficulty as capacity expands. Months 4 through 6 achieve automatic execution without requiring conscious willpower or sustained effort. Progress indicators showing discipline development include decreased temptation to break commitments as they become more automatic, increased ease of maintaining discipline without constant internal struggle, automatic execution without internal negotiation or debate, stronger identity as disciplined person rather than someone trying to be disciplined, and consistent follow-through becoming your normal default rather than exception requiring special effort. The daily practice accountability requires tracking every single commitment you make versus commitments you actually keep, measuring your discipline success rate objectively with numbers, not feelings, identifying specific breakdown patterns that reveal where systems need improvement, adjusting your approach based on failure data rather than hoping willpower improves, and maintaining brutal honesty about actual performance because self-deception prevents improvement. Discipline requires daily practice. Occasional effort creates no lasting capacity. Practice systematically or remain undisciplined. The compounding discipline effect means each day of successful discipline makes the next day measurably easier. Consistent practice builds neural pathways that make self-control progressively more automatic. Systematic execution develops over weeks and months rather than appearing suddenly. Enforced discipline that initially requires significant effort eventually becomes natural discipline that executes without conscious management because your brain has literally rewired through repeated practice. You practice forced discipline daily now. Finally, you must understand permanence. Chapter 10. Forced discipline is permanent practice. Self-control requires daily maintenance. Forced discipline is not achievement you reach once and maintain automatically forever, but ongoing practice requiring daily maintenance throughout your entire life, because temporary practice creates only temporary discipline that disappears rapidly when you stop actively building and reinforcing it. Without consistent daily practice and deliberate maintenance, your old, undisciplined patterns return predictably as default behaviors. Your willpower capacity decreases progressively back toward baseline. Automatic execution deteriorates into effortful struggle. Overall self-control weakens systematically, and the excuse-making and rationalization patterns that previously controlled you resume operation as if you'd never developed any discipline at all. Neural pathways for discipline weaken steadily without regular use, while pathways for undisciplined behavior strengthen progressively through default activation, making the discipline you worked hard to build over months vanish surprisingly rapidly without ongoing maintenance and reinforcement. This isn't failure or character flaw, but simple neuroscience where neural connections strengthen with use and weaken with disuse, meaning stopping practice guarantees losing capacity you built regardless of how strong your discipline became at its peak. Temporary practice creates temporary discipline. Permanent practice creates unbreakable self-control. Practice daily or lose capacity built. Daily non-negotiables maintain forced discipline permanently through specific practices that must continue indefinitely. Morning discipline ritual establishes control over each day before external demands begin. Implementation intention adherence removes decisions that enable failure. Temptation resistance maintains self-control strength through regular practice. Progressive challenge prevents regression to previous comfort levels, and tracking and measurement maintains awareness and accountability that casual approach loses completely. After months of consistent daily practice without skipping or making excuses, profound transformation occurs as you shift from forcing yourself to act through willpower to acting automatically without resistance, from requiring conscious willpower to executing without internal debate, from consciously controlling yourself through effort to self-control being your natural default state, and from discipline feeling like effort to discipline being fundamental aspect of your identity that operates automatically. Integration progresses through entirely predictable stages that everyone experiences. Conscious incompetence means you're painfully aware you lack discipline but cannot yet maintain it consistently despite understanding what you should do. Conscious competence means you can maintain discipline effectively, but only through deliberate effort and conscious management. Unconscious competence means discipline operates automatically without requiring conscious management because neural pathways are so well established that execution happens naturally. This complete transformation requires months of consistent daily practice without exceptions, genuine patience with gradual capacity building that doesn't match your desire for instant change, acceptance that discipline is permanent practice, not temporary project with endpoint, commitment to daily maintenance forever, not just until you feel disciplined enough, and understanding that stopping practice means losing capacity built because maintenance is required permanently. Forced discipline becomes fundamental identity through permanent daily practice that transforms you completely from undisciplined person into someone who executes consistently regardless of feelings, from unreliable into genuinely dependable, from intention into action, from dreams into achievement, and from wishing into doing through refusing to negotiate with yourself and maintaining the specific daily practices that make discipline inevitable rather than optional or dependent on temporary motivation. Temporary practice creates temporary discipline. Permanent practice creates unbreakable self-control. Practice daily or lose capacity built. You understand now that forced discipline requires permanent daily practice to maintain the self-control capacity, willpower reserves, and automatic execution systems you've worked so hard to develop over months of consistent effort. Stop thinking you can develop discipline temporarily, then stop practicing while expecting it to remain, and start committing absolutely to daily practice as permanent lifestyle. Understanding that unbreakable self-control requires ongoing maintenance through consistent daily attention to the practices that build and preserve your transformation from someone who cannot control themselves to someone who executes regardless of feelings. You have learned 10 principles for forced discipline. Stop relying on motivation that fails constantly and start building discipline that executes regardless. Stop making plans you never follow and start creating systems guaranteeing execution. Forced discipline never depends on feelings. Systematic self-control produces inevitable results. Unbreakable habits execute automatically, and disciplined action creates the success that motivation alone promises, but never delivers through permanent daily practice, starting now and continuing forever. You have learned 10 principles for forced discipline. You lack discipline. Recognize self-control failure patterns. Understand discipline psychology, the neuroscience of self-control. Design your environment. Remove temptation and friction. Build keystone habits, one habit that changes everything. Use implementation intentions. Automate discipline through planning. Practice deliberate discomfort. Build discipline through voluntary hardship. Measure and track everything. Data drives discipline. Build discipline gradually. Progressive overload for self-control. Practice forced discipline daily. Build unbreakable self-control. Forced discipline is permanent practice. Self-control requires daily maintenance. What matters now is action today. Identify one area where you lack discipline completely. Design environment to make discipline easier. Choose one keystone habit to build starting tomorrow. 5 daily practices beginning immediately. Morning discipline ritual, implementation intention execution, temptation resistance practice, discomfort tolerance training, evening discipline review. Every single day, without exception. This builds forced discipline. This creates unbreakable self-control. Stop relying on motivation that fails constantly and start building discipline that executes regardless. Stop making plans you never follow and start creating systems guaranteeing execution. Forced discipline never depends on feelings. Systematic self-control produces inevitable results. Unbreakable habits execute automatically, and disciplined action creates the success that motivation alone promises, but never delivers through permanent daily practice starting now.